HOA Karen raced her ATV across my field, so I let loose the bull on her. Have you ever stood there, fists clenched, watching someone tear through everything you've built like it meant nothing and felt the fire rise in your chest, knowing no one was coming to stop them but you? That was me last October. The wind had just started to turn cold out here in north-central Texas, and my pasture was finally recovering from a long, dry summer. I'd been tending that soil for years, no tractors, just hand seeding, wildflower restoration, and a carefully controlled herd rotation with my livestock. This land fed more than just me. It was part of a regenerative project that fed local families and protected pollinators too. I say all that because I want you to understand. This field wasn't just a field. It was my livelihood, my heart. And then came her, Karen Maddox, HOA vice president. A woman whose personality was louder than the aftermarket exhaust on her blood-red ATV. She lived 2 lots over, in a stucco mansion that stuck out like a sore thumb in our otherwise rural landscape. She'd always looked down on us ranchers, called our land an eyesore, and once tried to pass an ordinance requiring all barns in the HOA perimeter be painted earth tone beige. Yeah, beige barns. Imagine that. But it wasn't until that day when she came flying through my ryegrass field at full throttle on her four-wheeler that I realized just how far she was willing to go. I didn't see her coming. I heard the whine of her engine, a scream of metal and arrogance. I ran out the front door barefoot, heart thudding. And there she was, helmetless, scarf flying, laughing as she whipped through the middle of my rotational paddock like it was her personal racetrack. Behind her, clumps of soil exploded from her tires, tearing through the butterfly milkweed I'd spent 2 years cultivating. She rode straight through a bee sanctuary post and kept going. I shouted, waving my arms. She ignored me, just kept laughing like some cartoon villain with a noise addiction. And here's the part where it went from reckless to dangerous. My bull, Samson, was in the adjoining pasture and the gate was cracked open because I'd just come back from waterline repairs. One good jolt and he'd be through. Karen saw the bull. She didn't stop. She sped up. Later, she'd tell the cops she thought he looked docile, and she wanted to pet him. No, seriously, that's what she said. But at the time, I saw her mouth the words, "Let him try me," as she zipped within feet of the fence line. That's when the gate burst open. Samson didn't hesitate. All 2,000 pounds of him charged like a freight train through the gap, eyes locked on the shrieking engine and the intruder behind it. Now, if you've never seen a seasoned bull give chase, let me paint it for you. There's no roar like it. It's not like a bear or a dog, it's thunder. It's earth itself shaking with rage. Karen screamed. At least she had the sense to realize she'd screwed up. Her ATV swerved violently, cutting across the far slope, trying to outrun him. But she'd already torn deep ruts through the topsoil, and her back was caught in one. The ATV flipped. She tumbled, rolled, and landed flat on her back in a patch of crimson clover. Samson skidded to a stop just feet from her body, snorting and pawing the ground, nostrils flaring, tail high. He didn't trample her. He just stood there, the ultimate judgment, as if saying, "This land ain't yours." I ran in, called him off, led him back. Karen was conscious but sobbing. Scratches all over. Her designer windbreaker shredded. Her phone crushed under the flipped ATV. The ambulance arrived 10 minutes later. But by then, 2 of my neighbors had already pulled security footage from their cameras. Turns out this wasn't her first trespass. One neighbor had footage of her riding across his property 2 weeks prior. Another caught her bragging on Facebook Live about breaking in the HOA's untamed zones. She called it civilizing the wild. Civilizing. Wild. That was when it all turned. And that, my friend, is only the beginning of the fall of Karen Maddox. The medics were gentle with her. I'll give them that. But Karen Maddox wasn't interested in medical help. She was already shouting, hoarse and furious, about lawsuits, property lines, uncontrolled livestock, and how she was lured into a trap. Her voice cracked from the dust in her lungs. But the entitlement? That stayed sharp as broken glass. "I want him arrested," she screamed from the stretcher, pointing at me. "He sicked that beast on me. He let that thing loose." I stood quiet, arms folded, dirt still fresh on my jeans. I didn't say a damn thing. But Sheriff Darnell, who'd known me since I was a teenager hauling hay for my uncle's ranch, wasn't buying it. He bent over her, real calm, and said, "Ma'am, 3 different surveillance cameras show you trespassing, uninvited, with no warning and driving a vehicle through protected agricultural land. That bull was in a secured pasture. You drove right past the posted sign." Karen's face went pale. "I didn't see any signs." He raised an eyebrow. "You mean the one that says, 'Do not enter active livestock and federal soil restoration'? The one your ATV knocked over and dragged for 20 yards. And that's when twist number 1 dropped. Because as they lifted her onto the gurney, her phone, the one I thought had been crushed, buzzed twice. A deputy picked it up, screen cracked but still working, and saw she had been live streaming. "Ma'am," he said, showing her screen to Darnell. "She was recording herself. There's a whole 30-minute stream." I walked over and saw it for myself. The video showed her whooping like a teenager on prom night, narrating her freedom ride and mocking lazy ranchers and idiot conservation rules. At one point, she even said, "If that dumb bull charges me, I'll sue this whole dirt farm into the ground." She had posted it on the HOA Facebook page. And now the board members were watching. Within an hour, the full video had been shared in our community group, the local AG board, and even picked up by a small environmental journalist who'd previously interviewed me about my regenerative grazing project. That's where the ripple effect started. Because unbeknownst to Karen, the clover field she damaged wasn't just mine, it was part of a USDA pilot study tied to native bee repopulation. And when she tore through it, she wiped out nearly an acre's worth of pollinator habitat. I got a call that evening from Dr. Miriam Saul, the lead entomologist for the study. Her voice trembled. "Jake, we just tagged the hives last week. Those weren't just wild bees, that was one of only 7 queen cycles we documented this year. Karen hadn't just trespassed. She'd destroyed federal-funded conservation research. And that meant this wasn't just a civil issue anymore. It was federal." 2 days later, a USDA enforcement officer showed up at her mansion with a cease and desist letter and notice of pending investigation. Her HOA cronies tried to block them at the gate, citing private community rules. But the officer simply said, "You see this badge? Your gate means nothing." Karen doubled down. She called a press conference. No, seriously. She went to the local news and claimed I had weaponized livestock, that the HOA was under siege by extremist farmers, and that she was the victim of a rural terrorism incident. She even faked a neck brace. But the internet doesn't forget. The footage of her ride, her mocking voice, her laughter, her bragging was everywhere. Even Inside Edition picked it up. Texas HOA Karen tries to outrun bull after destroying bee sanctuary. My cousin showed me the thumbnail. Karen's frozen mid-scream, hair wild, ATV half airborne behind her, and Samson in frame like a movie villain. The caption read, "She crossed the fence and found karma waiting." Her HOA board resigned that same week. Not all at once, it was like watching dominoes fall in slow motion. The treasurer quit first, saying he never co-signed any action involving private lands. Then the secretary released a statement that she had been pressured by Karen to push through initiatives that were not properly reviewed. Then came the federal lawsuit. The USDA filed for damages not just to my land, but to the pollinator study, the research infrastructure, and the ruined fencing. Total claim, $187,000. Her insurance dropped her. By Christmas, Karen Maddox had sold the ATV, put her house up for sale, and was seen shopping at the local consignment store, looking hollowed out, her once flaming blonde hair now a dry, brittle gray. People crossed the street to avoid her. The woman who once hosted HOA wine nights in her perfectly pruned backyard now couldn't even get an invitation to the community pancake breakfast. But the final blow? That came quietly. Sheriff Darnell told me, one evening, over coffee at the feed store, "You know what they found in her HOA emails?" I raised an eyebrow. She was planning a takeover, trying to convert adjacent properties, yours included, into a multi-use greenway for golf carts and upscale guest cabins. She called your ranch an obstacle to progress. I sat there for a long time after he left, staring out at my field. Samson grazed near the rebuilt fence. The new hives buzzed gently in the warm breeze. Life moved on. But something about those words stuck with me. Obstacle to progress. If that's what it means to protect land, bees, and legacy, then I'll be an obstacle every damn day. Now it's your turn, what do you think? Was I right to let the bull roam? Where's the line between justice and revenge when someone crosses the boundary literally and morally? The lawsuit moved faster than I expected. Honestly, I thought maybe it'd stall in red tape or get swept under some HOA rug. But once the federal angle hit, things started unfolding like dominoes in a storm. 3 weeks after the incident, I was summoned to testify before the Agricultural Land Conservation Council, along with 2 USDA officials and Dr. Saul. The hearing was held in Austin, but the media coverage stretched way past Texas. Apparently, it's not every day an HOA president plows through a federally registered bee restoration zone while live-streaming it to Facebook. Karen showed up with a high-priced lawyer and an attitude that said, "I'm the real victim here." She wore a pearl-white blazer, hair pulled back so tight it looked painful, and believe it or not still had the neck brace on. But the moment they played the live stream in the hearing room, with her voice ringing clear, "These dumb hicks won't even know what hit 'em," the entire room shifted. You could feel it, like a curtain had been yanked away. Even her lawyer looked uncomfortable. That's when the second twist dropped. Turns out Karen had a history. A state compliance officer presented prior complaints from 2 other counties. One for illegally rerouting a walking trail through an ecological zone in hill country, another for attempting to bulldoze native cacti on state-managed land to create visibility for an HOA dog park project. Both cases were closed without charges, but now, with this federal violation and a pile of evidence, everything reopened. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about me. Karen had made a career out of stomping on what she didn't understand. She didn't hate my ranch because it was messy or inconvenient. She hated it because it stood for something she couldn't control. She thought she could push people around like lawn ornaments. But this time she pushed too far. When the USDA listed the fines allowed $187,000 in direct restoration, $40,000 in bee repopulation penalties, and another $80,000 for soil rehabilitation, Karen's hand shot up, trembling. "This is outrageous. You're ruining my life over a field. I didn't know it was government land." Dr. Saul calmly replied, "It wasn't government land, Ms. Maddox. It was protected land owned by a private citizen under federal partnership. And you destroyed it on camera." Karen slumped back in her chair. For the first time, she looked small. And then, the third and final blow came from someone I didn't expect. Her ex-husband. He'd been sitting quietly in the back, I hadn't even noticed him. But when public testimony opened, he stood, cleared his throat, and walked up front. "I have something to add," he said. His name was Peter Maddox, and apparently, he'd been the financial foundation behind a lot of Karen's HOA projects, including the purchase of that ATV. "I want it on record," he said, voice steady, "that the vehicle in question was purchased using a misallocated HOA fund labeled as emergency maintenance equipment. She told the board it was for trail access. She used it for vanity rides and personal vendettas." The room erupted. Reporters leaned in. Karen shrieked, "You liar. You swore." But the damage was done. The very next day, HOA legal counsel resigned. The entire board was dissolved by court order. A special community vote was called to form a new interim leadership group. Karen? She tried to disappear, but the press wouldn't let her. And neither did the people whose lives she'd meddled with. Within a month, her house was foreclosed not because of the trial, not yet, but because the banks found discrepancies in her HOA reimbursements. She'd been double-charging community funds for outreach dinners, some of which were hosted in Vegas resorts. And then the final straw. Her trial date came. Not civil criminal charges, environmental vandalism, fraudulent HOA misappropriation, and obstruction of conservation activity. When the judge read the charges aloud, she stared down at the table like it wasn't even happening. like the world had betrayed her. I showed up for the final hearing. I didn't have to. The DA already had everything they needed. But I came anyway, not out of spite, but because people like Karen count on their victims staying silent, staying tired, staying out of sight. I didn't say much when I spoke. Just this. She didn't just destroy plants. She didn't just ruin fences or drive a toy through wildflowers. She violated something deeper. Principle. That a person's land, their legacy, their care for the earth matters. And if people like her are allowed to treat that like a joke, then what are we even protecting anymore? The courtroom was quiet after that. Karen didn't look at me. Couldn't. She was sentenced to 6 months of probation, mandatory environmental rehabilitation courses, 800 hours of community service on actual farms, and full restitution of damages. The civil suits piled up after. By spring, she was bankrupt, legally barred from serving on any board of governance for the next decade. Her name was stripped from every HOA record. The town newsletter stopped printing her column. The wine club disbanded. But me, I got to keep going. The bees returned. Samson turned 10 and became a minor celebrity. Someone even made a kid's book called Samson the Defender. And one morning, just before sunrise, I stood at the rebuilt fence, sipping coffee, when a little girl from the school 2 towns over came to visit with her class. She looked at me and asked, "Did that lady ever say sorry for hurting the bees?" I thought for a second. Then I smiled. "No," I said. "But nature has a way of reminding us anyway. So now I ask you, where do we draw the line between standing our ground and seeking revenge? When someone like Karen crosses it, what do we owe them, if anything at all? Let me know your thoughts. I'm still figuring it out myself." Spring came early that year. It was one of those rare Texas springs where the air is still cool enough to wake you up, but the soil's warm enough to start giving back. The kind of spring that makes you believe things can grow again even after someone tried to ruin it all. After the dust of Karen's downfall settled, I figured life would go back to normal. The land would heal, I'd reseed what I could. The bees would either return or they wouldn't. But what I didn't expect was how the people would change. It started with the local kids. Dr. Saul and her team had to shut down the study officially. But when word spread about what Karen had destroyed, 2 middle schools and a 4-H group reached out asking if they could help rebuild. Not because they were told to, because they wanted to. One girl wrote a letter that still chokes me up when I read it. "I saw the video of your bull and I was scared at first. But then I realized he was just protecting his home. Like a superhero with horns. Can we come plant flowers for the bees he saved?" So we did. Over the next month, I watched as 30-something kids, their boots muddy and smiles wide, replanted clover, milkweed, and black-eyed Susans all along the north pasture. Dr. Saul came back too. She said it was the most heart she'd ever seen put into an ecosystem. Her voice cracked when she called it citizen conservation in its purest form. Even Samson got in on it. He'd come stand along the fence and snort like an old watchdog while the kids worked. They gave him a flower crown one day. I swear he wore it like a king. But while the field healed, the community still had scars. A lot of folks didn't realize how deep Karen's claws had gone until they started digging. Turns out, she wasn't just tormenting me. She'd fined retirees for hanging wind chimes, claimed a vet's flagpole violated roofline symmetry, and blocked permit requests for accessible ramps at 3 separate homes. All of them disabled. All of them too tired to fight. Well, they weren't tired anymore. The new HOA leadership was different. Real folks. A former teacher, a retired firefighter, a young mom whose son had autism and just wanted a backyard sensory garden without being reported. Together, they rewrote every outdated policy, tossed out the Karen-era bylaws, and voted unanimously to designate all surrounding wild acreage as community conservation corridors. But here's the part that still makes me shake my head in disbelief. The HOA didn't just apologize. They honored the land. They renamed the area behind my north fence Samson's Watch. Put up a wooden plaque hand-carved by one of the veterans Karen tried to find that reads, "In defense of balance where wild meets wisdom." They invited me to speak at the dedication. I wasn't sure I would, but I did. And I told them the truth. This field nearly broke me. Not because of weather. Not because of work. But because for a minute, I believed people like her couldn't be stopped. That doing the right thing didn't matter anymore. But you all proved me wrong. Not everyone clapped. Some sat quiet, eyes glassy, like they were remembering every time they let Karen bully them into silence. But that silence, it didn't feel like fear anymore. Felt like mourning. And the kind that comes before growth. A few weeks later, I heard Karen had moved to another county. Some say she's staying with a cousin. Others said she tried to start a new HOA and nobody showed up. I didn't go looking for her. But one morning, I got a plain white envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a torn photograph, a still from the live stream of her crash. On the back, scribbled in what looked like eyeliner pencil, were the words, "I really thought I was untouchable. I hope you find peace. I'm still looking for it." No name, no apology, just a brittle sliver of what might have been regret. I didn't frame it. I didn't burn it either. I tucked it in the back of the filing cabinet under K. Not for Karen. For karma. Because here's what I've learned after all this. Karma doesn't always show up with trumpets. Sometimes it wears dusty boots and walks slowly through fields you tried to destroy. Sometimes it has horns. Sometimes it's 30 kids with flower seeds and dirt under their fingernails, planting hope where hatred tried to root. And sometimes it's just silence. The kind that speaks volumes when the noise is finally gone. I still walk the pasture every morning. Still patch fences. Still talk to Samson like he's an old war buddy who knows too much. The land's healing. I'm healing. And every now and then, someone stops by the gate and says, "Aren't you the guy from the bull video?" I just smile and say, "Nope, I'm the guy who listened to the bull." So tell me, if someone stomped on everything you built, everything you cared for, would you fight back? Or would you let karma do its work? When is standing your ground justice and when is it revenge? I'm still figuring that part out. What would you have done?